Medical students consistently show suppressed immune responses during exam periods. Their natural killer cell activity drops, their antibody production falls, and their wounds heal more slowly. Stress doesn't just feel bad. It rewires your body's defenses at the molecular level, and the field of psychoneuroimmunology exists precisely to document and explain this intimate connection between mind and immune system. Hans Selye, working in the 1930s, discovered that animals exposed to a wide variety of stressors, cold, infection, trauma, all showed the same physiological pattern of response. He called this the general adaptation syndrome, with 3 stages. The alarm stage is the immediate activation of the fight-or-flight response. The resistance stage is a sustained mobilization of resources to cope with the ongoing stressor. The exhaustion stage occurs when prolonged stress depletes adaptive reserves, leaving the organism vulnerable to illness and breakdown. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, is the neuroendocrine pathway that mediates the chronic stress response. When the brain perceives a sustained threat, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenal glands to release cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Cortisol mobilizes energy by raising blood sugar and suppressing non-essential functions including immune activity, digestion, and reproduction. Chronically elevated cortisol also damages the hippocampus, shrinking the neurons responsible for memory and stress regulation, which can create a vicious cycle of chronic stress and impaired coping. The relationship between stress and immunity is not simply negative. It depends critically on duration. Acute stress, the short-term alarm response, can actually mobilize immune function by directing immune cells to sites where they are most likely to be needed in a fight-or-flight scenario. Chronic stress, however, tells a different story. Sustained cortisol elevation powerfully suppresses immune activity, reducing natural killer cell activity, impairing antibody production, and slowing wound healing. The immune system is designed for acute threats, not years of chronic activation. Psychoneuroimmunology is the scientific field that studies the bidirectional communication between psychological processes, the nervous system, and the immune system. The field emerged in the 1970s when researchers Robert Ader and Nicholas Cohen demonstrated that immune responses could be classically conditioned. Rats trained to associate saccharin with an immunosuppressive drug later showed immune suppression to saccharin alone. This proved that the immune system is not autonomous but communicates continuously with the brain through shared chemical messengers. Social relationships are one of the most powerful predictors of health and longevity in all of epidemiology. Meta-analyses of studies covering over 3 million people have found that social isolation increases mortality risk by 26% and loneliness increases it by 26 to 32%. Researcher Julianne Holt-Lundstad has summarized the finding this way. Chronic loneliness carries approximately the same health risk as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. The mechanism runs through the stress response and immune system. Isolated individuals show chronically elevated inflammatory markers. One of the most consistent findings in stress research is that perceived control, the belief that one can influence outcomes, dramatically reduces the physiological impact of stressors. In classic experiments, rats given inescapable shock developed lasting immune suppression and learned helplessness. Rats given identical amounts of escapable shock did not. The shock was identical. Only the perceived control differed. In humans, chronic lack of control, as experienced by workers in low-status jobs with high demands and low autonomy, is one of the strongest predictors of cardiovascular disease. Lazarus and Folkman's influential model distinguishes 2 broad classes of coping strategies. Problem-focused coping involves taking direct action to address or eliminate the stressor, studying harder before an exam, leaving an abusive relationship, or seeking medical treatment. Problem-focused coping tends to be most effective when the stressor is controllable and changeable. Attempting to use problem-focused coping on an uncontrollable stressor, like the death of a loved one, can actually increase distress by repeatedly exposing the person to an unsolvable problem. Emotion-focused coping addresses the emotional experience of the stressor rather than the stressor itself. When a stressor cannot be changed, a terminal diagnosis, a natural disaster, the loss of a job in a recession, Managing one's emotional response is often the most adaptive available strategy. Seeking social support, finding meaning in adversity, using humor, or engaging in mindfulness are all forms of emotion-focused coping. The key insight is that there is no universally superior coping strategy. The match between coping style and stressor controllability determines effectiveness. The research literature on stress resilience consistently highlights three especially powerful buffers. Regular aerobic exercise reduces baseline cortisol, promotes neurogenesis, and improves emotional regulation. Strong social support networks provide both emotional resources and practical assistance that reduce the appraisal of events as threatening. And perceived control, as discussed, directly reduces the physiological stress response. Interventions that target all three, like exercise programs within a supportive community context, show the largest and most durable benefits for stress-related health outcomes. Stress is not just a psychological feeling. It is a biological state with cascading effects on immunity, memory, cardiovascular function, and longevity. The mind-body connection is not metaphorical, it is molecular. Understanding psychoneuroimmunology means understanding that how you think, who you know, and whether you feel in control are not separate from your physical health. They are central to it.